Hello, and welcome to Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about custom items, Buddy's custom items in particular, in TTRPGs. But before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what it is we do on this podcast?
On this podcast, we like to talk about games. We're talking so much about tabletop games. Okay, so this is an episode by request because friend of the cast, my partner Rachel, basically asked me once. She was like, I think I want to do artifacts for my D&D game. And was like, how do you do them? And I was like, it's complicated, and it's probably a good episode of the podcast. So I instead farmed this episode topic out to us right here, kind of right now. But we can also talk a little bit about some of the general stuff that goes into sort of like the item creation process, because I do think that making custom items is a very common I don't know, it's just like a common part of being a DM, and understanding that kind of system I think is pretty core to playing. Do you feel that way about tabletop RPGs?
What's it? Sorry, hold on 1 second. Gotta make sure that everything's all right here. I heard someone knocking on the door. Yes, it is
like making custom items for your players in a tabletop game.
I think that's fairly common. I don't think it's very common, right? Like, I think if you're running like an adventure path, it's not really a thing. It's also,
how many times have you, man? Tell that to me in Hell's Rebels. How many times have you in a game gotten custom items from the GM?
3 or 4, I want to say.
Okay.
Which is, and I haven't played all that many games, but like the group I play with in person here, that's just running the adventure path, not a custom item. Although the GM did run a custom dungeon with like a stock item tied to my, like there's a item tied to my deity that wasn't originally in the AP that he put together an encounter for to give me the special item just because he thought it was cool, right?
Okay,
but like
cool.
Nothing that he built himself. But like famously Mark, in the 5e game I played in, Chris made me an item that I'm pretty sure was custom, but not like but that wasn't like a universal thing for the party. It was kind of like a tied to my character specifically as like a warlock. So I'd say it's common but not universal, if that makes sense.
Okay, that does make sense to me, I think. I obviously have a pretty complicated. I'm like naturally a tinkerer, right? Like I naturally want to tinker really hard with my games. It is pretty uncommon for me in particular to want to play, or I'm sorry, to want to GM without like messing with stuff. And I feel like this is kind of the ultimate version of the way that I wanna mess with items, because just like as a refresher, when it comes to what my system for artifacts looks like, I call these artifacts. The idea, they're called something in D&D. They have a term in D&D that I can't remember. Or I'm sorry, not in D&D,
in Pathfinder they're called relics.
In Pathfinder they're called relics. Yeah. And it's also similar to a thing in Critical Role that I can't remember. Our friend of the cast Merle told me about this thing that they did in Critical Role, which is pretty similar to what I'm doing. But basically, artifacts are items that players get pretty early. There are 3 of them. They have an alignment. They have a sort of subclass. They are generally tied to sort of like a piece of a player's sort of kit. And we'll go into the details about some of this stuff a little bit later down the line. And they also have some level of kind of like lore associated with them that the player can come to understand or discover more about, right? One of the features for my artifacts is that when someone gets an artifact, and typically it's when they cast the identify spell, but like that's not always a thing. It was in 5e 2024 or 2014, but not 2024 kind of thing. But the idea is basically like when somebody figures out that this thing is an artifact, they get a flashback of importance to the artifact sort of creation or founding that keys into sort of its like lore and its history and kind of all of that stuff. And like it's the kind of thing that can create a breadcrumb that a player can chase down, all that kind of thing, right? And so it's that's like a pretty heavy system compared to, I feel like, what most GMs are looking to do when it comes to sort of magic items. But I actually find it easier to work on. Part of this is that like I hate the idea of like scrolling through magic items on a table somewhere and deciding, oh yeah, okay, there's a +1 greatsword in this treasure haul. It's like that to me is like the most boring idea ever. So I feel like I have to make items this incredible rigmarole because that's actually part of how they become engaging to do in the preparation process for for a campaign.
Yeah, no, and we've talked about this a little bit before. I think there is some value to like roll on a random loot table, right?
Yeah.
And like let the party figure out what to do with this. This is actually a thing that I think is a point against rules as written Pathfinder, because +1s on like items are like like the kind of base stuff. These are runes that are by their nature transferable, and so sorry, Mr. Collins has thoughts too. But like standard in Pathfinder 2e, like if you find a +1 Grace Ford, you can pull the +1 off on a rune and like throw it on a different item. And the intent here is obvious, right? Like, whoever's running the adventure path, like put in a great sword because great swords are cool and they're fairly common. But your very special boy is using a warhammer, and by your special boy I mean me, because that's what I use, right? Like whenever I'm playing a martial character, and it's like I don't want to use the greatsword. I want to use the warhammer, and it's like okay, just suck the +1 off of the greatsword and put it on the warhammer, and everything is honky dory. And I think there's room for some of that, but I also think that there's something to be said for like, well, tough luck, Buttercup. Either figure out how to use the greatsword or pay the penalty, right? Like
yeah, I absolutely agree with this. This is something that I think D&D does an okay job at this point, but it used to do a pretty terrible job at because of the nature of like, like exotic weapon proficiency.
You also have a cat problem?
Maybe? What the fuck was that? Whatever, who cares?
We're both being
exotic weapon
haunted.
proficiency, spending an entire feat in order to learn like an elven curve blade or some weird ass weapon, and then the thing that drops out of the dungeon is like a +1 halberd, and now you're using this halberd. It's like, man, that fucking sucks. In 5e it's better because in 5e you can swap your stuff around much easier in terms of like so basically what the 5e did sort of the opposite thing that Pathfinder did. What Pathfinder did is, oh, your pluses is to warhammers? Okay, cool. Well, the pluses, those are transferable. Those are fungible. We can just move the +1 off of the greatsword, put it on the warhammer. What you can do in 5e is you can say, oh, you have weapon focus? Well, your weapon focus and weapon mastery, you can just redo those for the new weapon. And so when you get the halberd instead of the greatsword, you can just spec yourself into halberds, basically. Which I do like on some conceptual level, because like there is a lot of fun in my mind to like getting a glaive and becoming a glaive guy, or getting a I don't know, getting a crossbow, and kind of instead of being longbows, your crossbows as like a ranger or something like that, kind of where the game is sort of nudges you in a direction and you end up kind of committing. That's pretty satisfying. But also at the same time, I don't know, there are a lot of people who I do think have that instinct to be like, oh no, I'm playing a dwarf who is using a shield and a hammer. I do not want to be a dwarf who is using an axe and a hammer, or a dwarf who is using a sword and a hammer. I'm using a or a shield or whatever. Yeah. I'm using hammers. Hammers are my weapons, right? Like this is the thing that I'm going for, kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think part of the problem is just kind of like these static bonuses, right? Like I think,
yep.
Like the more I think about it, I think the more I like automatic bonus progression as a system in Pathfinder, because it's like yeah, it screws the balance a little bit because it's essentially, instead of having to find 1 + 1 rune for every weapon that you want to use, you only have to find you don't have to find any, you just get it. But like taking those kind of like boring numbers out of the game, I think is good.
I think there's a part of it that's about the Christmas tree effect. The Christmas tree effect being like opening the present on Christmas Day, right? Like there is a level of gratification. This is like my Steel Man pitch for what I would say for the raw Pathfinder weapons. I open up the Christmas tree, or I open up my Christmas present and I get a +1 rune or a rune of striking or something. That feels good because like it is random. I'm not like looking forward to it in the same way with automatic bonus progression. But in general, I just think that nobody, I just think nobody cares, and it mostly comes down to
See,
it just mostly comes down to the pluses.
I think that was
basically.
true in the older editions, or even in, I think 5th edition does a fairly good job of it. I've granted I've only ever played one game of 5th edition. Is that like in PF2E, right? Like even though it's random, you're expecting to get it around like 2nd level, right? Like or 3rd
Yeah.
level, right?
Yeah, and this is what I'm talking about. This is where you get the expectations, right? Where now everybody in the party has +1 runes except for you. And it's like, when am I going to get it? When is it going to drop for me? Now all of a sudden I'm kind of resentful almost because I feel entitled to the thing. I feel owed it. And I think that kind of destroys that Christmas present kind of effect. And it's a little bit different because like these things are so baseline. This is like part of my thing when it comes to artifacts, I guess, right? With artifacts, I'm trying to avoid the +1 weapon is the best feeling, right?
Yeah.
The artifacts, and we'll talk about some of the examples that I've designed. The artifacts are built to capture the same feeling of power, but like be situational, and you have to turn them on in order to really get sort of the benefit that they sort of like give and provide. And I also think that there's the level of sort of narrative stuff that just matters way more in terms of connecting like a person to an artifact by being able to go, this isn't just a +1 sword. This is a sword from a very specific person who had a backstory and a history, right? When Josh got the Giga Sword in the Dragonlance game, right? The Giga Sword has this like special ability or whatever, but like he's so much more connected to that sword because of the nature of its history rather than it just being like an item that kind of like pops out of the chest. And I feel like this is the big sort of advantage about artifacts. You are shrinking sort of your core, I would probably say, magic item pool by quite a lot, because you're sort of, instead of sprinkling a ton of magic items throughout your campaign or your adventure or whatever else you're doing, you are instead just collapsing all of that down to one sort of straightforward set of items. But each of those items just like has so much more to offer a player compared to like a baseline magic item that you pull out of a box at the end of a dungeon.
Yeah, and we've talked about this a little before. I think you can get those moments, but it's never with like the chaff magic items, right? Like it's never like you never feel great because you found a +1 flaming sword, right? Like that I mean that feels nice, right? Like that's a cool thing to have at some level. And I think in previous, like I said, in previous editions of the game, that was a big moment because you find like one of those over the course of your game, right? As opposed to it being expected. But like you could still like get those moments, I think, but it has to be with like the more unique items. Like in the adventure path I'm playing in, for instance, I have had this Earthglide cloak forever, but there was a moment where it was like, oh, I just like zoop under the firewall, right? Like because I could go through the ground. It's like that's a memorable moment, right? And that's enabled by the fact that I just happen to have this piece of thing holding around, but it doesn't ever happen with like my plus, what is it? It's a +3 greater striking or major striking, brilliant acidic flail, which is a thing that my character is wielding, right?
Yeah, I think that stuff actually feels bad. So for instance, in something like an adventure path, when you have a villain that is set up and you kill him by the end of the first or second book sort of thing, and all he has is like a +1, thinking about like the Stag Lord from Kingmaker, and he has like a +1 short bow or something like that. You know what I mean? Like this is what a lot of what I'm sort of pitching when it comes to artifacts is, it's not a +1 short bow. It's a special short bow that has this incredible effect, and you're going to keep it for the rest of the adventure. And it does all of this like neat, cool, like it does all of this kind of like neat, cool stuff that I feel like players can kind of hold on to. There is a downside to that, and we could talk about that in sort of a bit. But I just feel like that's the kind of thing that that we're looking to do. Okay, so I do want to get into some. Let me get into some specifics. Let me help get this kind of along. So one thing I have are these I have these spreadsheets. I don't really know if I want to share them necessarily, but I will talk about some of the artifacts that I have designed for the games that I am running, as sort of like narrative examples of sort of the principles kind of at play. But the first thing that I'm doing when I'm thinking about these magic items, the actually very, very first thing that I do is I come up with places of each of the characters' classes that I feel like I can sort of accentuate. So for instance, in Shadow of the Dragon Queen, which is the Dragonlance game that I was running, the D&D 5e edition, for the character Jairus, who's played by our friend Frank. He's playing a sorcerer. The very first artifact that I came up with, because I was thinking about it all the time, I was like, what do I do for an artifact for a wild magic sorcerer? And the answer was, oh, I want an artifact that triggers on his wild magic surges, right? So wild magic sorcerers, they trigger the wild magic every once in a while. They roll on the wild magic surge table. The surge table does a random chaos thing, right? And I was like, I want to make an artifact that interacts with that. Really what I'm saying when I was talking about that is I want an artifact that interacts with the core mechanic of a wizard subclass, right? And it's pretty common for me to sort of like point one thing at a subclass, one thing at kind of a class feature. It's pretty common that I'll make one that's like racially sort of like tinged from time to time. But it's just like, this is where I'm thinking. I'm like, what are the pieces of a character's kind of class mechanics that I want to work with? And part of that is understanding what their classes do, what their classes are trying to kind of accomplish, and also how the individual kind of like mechanics work. So for instance, when it came to the wild magic, the thing that I wrote was, and I actually think I wrote this, the thing that I wrote was, the first time you trigger a wild magic surge between each long rest, you can choose to reverse the percentile dice on the wild magic surge table. Doing so would turn a 35 into a 53, for instance, right? So basically the idea is, once per day, when wild magic sort of triggers, you get to choose of one of two rather than being stuck with whatever option that you kind of got, right? This is a relatively low power artifact that I kind of designed. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but it's like, this is maybe the best, most basic example of sort of what an artifact looks like. It keys into a very specific kind of feature. It accentuates that feature in an interesting way that only triggers kind of like on a bonus sort of thing. So this isn't something that makes all wild magic triggers better. It doesn't add +1s that are kind of like constantly you're tracking them throughout kind of like whatever. It is just like one thing that happens that can have a pretty major effect, because theoretically speaking, you can roll into an intense wild magic surge sort of opportunity. So I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me, right? Like it's flavorful, it's unique, and it's something that's definitely relevant to the character at hand.
Yeah. But part of this is also that I am looking to make the sort of artifacts holistically. So when I was doing the artifacts for Dragonlance, I was never making one artifact at a time, if that makes sense. I kind of always had a conception of all three artifacts for each player all the time, because part of the balance of artifacts is having the nature of them kind of pressed against one another. So for instance, for Jairus, his other two artifacts say a couple of other things. One is, once per day as a bonus action, you can infuse yourself with the power of Bronze Dragon's Lightning until the end of your turn. When you do, the next spell you cast has its spell level increased by an amount equal to your proficiency modifier, and any damage it deals changes to lightning damage. So basically, you can upcast a spell for free, and you upcast by an amount equal to your spell level. This one is actually, I think, very powerful. This is an extremely powerful artifact. It gives essentially a level 1 character access to level 3 spells, but they just have to cast one of their baseline spells at this upcast sort of thing. So you cannot walk into a level 3 spell like Fireball, but you could cast a magic missile at sort of the equivalent power level, we would assume, sort of as a Fireball. And part of my balancing equation in this was, I was like, okay, the wild magic surge is a pretty weak artifact. It's an artifact that doesn't actually do all that much in terms of like raw, like kind of damage output. So it is okay to give this secondary artifact, which I do actually think is quite powerful, in order to sort of make up for the combat efficacy of sort of both. And then Frank's third one, which is called the Razor Mind's Scalpel, you add Mind Spike to your list of spells known, and whenever you use meta magic to empower your Mind Spike spell, you rip into the target's mind, revealing information as if it failed a Detect Thoughts save. This one, when I was thinking about it, I was like, okay, I have two things for Frank's character that are big, flashy, once per day power shots, right? I want to give something that's a little bit more consistent, and something that just kind of like raises the overall just like level of power that his character had access to. And so that became the Razor Mind Scalpel. Basically giving him a spell for free on his spells known list as a sorcerer. And then it also interacts with the meta magic feature in order to make the Mind Spike spell into something that brings real utility, right? Frank can now Mind Spike the bad guy in order to read his mind and perform an interrogation in a particularly like good, powerful sort of way. So in that way, like I designed all three of these things right on top of each other, kind of as this package, because it covers a lot of my different kind of design goals. Number one, I wanted to have big, powerful sort of effects. I also wanted to raise the consistent power level of his character. I wanted to tap into a few different mechanics that he's working with. Those ended up being meta magic, wild magic as a subclass, and just spell casting, like spell casting in general, basically. And all three of those had kind of their own thing. There's this extra piece of this, which is that I also designed a cycle of artifacts for all of the 5e players. Basically, every player in the 5e game got a ring, and the rings all had sort of not like similar bonuses or effects, but they had kind of like thematically similar kind of effects. They all could call upon the power of a dragon as a bonus action. It changed the damage they deal to the damage of that dragon's breath weapon, and it keyed into their proficiency modifier at a certain sort of point. So just like on the level 1-to-1 with Frank, that was how I designed the artifacts for Jarris Terith.
Excellent. No, that makes perfect sense, right? Like you targeted these things that are like particular to the character, right? Like that all makes sense to me. Yeah, I don't really have much else to say there. Like it sounds pretty compelling, right? Like,
I guess so. I guess I want to talk a little bit about some of the other things that go into this. Maybe this one, it's better for me to talk about 7th Expedition. So I'm going to be honest with you. With 7th Expedition, I spent a lot of time designing the artifacts. With Dragonlance, I had to get them done in a week because I was like, we're playing the Dragonlance game, and I know I want the artifacts to start showing up. So I need to design basically the first session. I knew that they were going to, there's a medallion, and the medallion had the rings inside. And I was like, what I want to do is at the end of the first session, the medallion breaks, and those rings that are inside, they each get a ring, which is exactly how it was. That was sort of the end of the first session. Everybody gets this artifact ring. They see this vision of the dragons that were making the rings die, and it plays into Dragonlance lore, all of the rest of this. But because when I was designing the rings, I was like, I have to design the complete picture for each of these characters. I can't just design the rings and then like leave the rest of that for later. It didn't really feel like I could. I ended up just designing the whole thing in one marathon sort of like session to kind of hit everything. When it came to 7th Expedition, I took way more time. I don't even remember when they found their first artifact. It took, actually, maybe I do remember when they found their first artifact. Let's take a quick look. Yeah, so with 7th Expedition, they found their first artifact maybe like the 5th or 6th session, because they went out and did a bunch of expedition stuff, and then they came back, and the very first artifact they got was for kind of like completing the first sort of like expedition, and it went to both. Ooh, excuse me. It went to, at the time, Greymare, and it went to Greymare, and it went to Marn. So it went to Rachel's character, and went to Harry's character. And the the artifacts in 7th Expedition are a little bit more like tied into sort of like the lore behind the characters themselves. So for instance, in Suran, the artifact for Rachel's Beastmaster class, this is Rhino Rider. This was the Dread Saurian's collar. And I know that a Dread Saurian is like a powerful lizardman creature. And so when the flashback happened, I was describing this whole thing with this gigantic, this gigantic lizard that had a huge war apparatus on its back kind of thing. And I feel like all of that probably ended up adding quite a lot more to the sort of things. But also it's funny because most of the characters in Dragonlance have picked up all of their artifacts, except for I'm pretty sure just Merle has not. I think he's missing one artifact because of kind of a weird quirk in how they chose to do things. But everyone else has picked up every single one of their artifacts at this point.
Nice.
Lou got an old hat. Oh yeah, the helm of the first. I actually think that one is a little bit lame, to be honest with you. The helm of the first Legionnaire, or the helm of the first Legion is what it's called, that you get off of Kazarak. I was intending for this to be your very first artifact, because in my brain, when I was designing 7th Expedition, you guys were going to kill Kazarak first because he starts right on top of you. But then, just the way the emergent sort of story played out, you ended up killing Kazarak when you did on the most recent session. So
that's why that's why I got it, because Buddy loves giving me lame shit.
the other one is so insanely good. So Lou, there are 3 artifacts. She hasn't had her 3rd one yet, but the first 2 that she got for Corin, who's a monk, the helm of the first Legion says, whenever you spend key on your turn, your awareness becomes heightened and you gain +2 AC until the beginning of your next turn. So it is this is sort of that consistent buff. It's like a flat buff, but it is particularly, it's like particularly light. It's like, oh, I have surrounded myself with a bunch of guys. I can use my key, turn on this powerful sort of like AC boost, but I only have 4 points of it, or whatever it is at level 4. I think it's only 4 points. But the other one that she has is the Crag Fists, which say once per day as a free action, you can activate the Crag Fist, covering your hands with granite hard stone until the beginning of your next turn. Your martial arts weapon die increases by 1, so a weapon die of 1d6 increases to 2d6. So that one is insane, because once per day, you full attack, essentially, you flurry of blows. So you attack once and then you attack 2 more times. You have turned all of your short swords into great swords, is the way I was thinking about it, basically. Because a short sword obviously does 1d6 damage and great swords do 2d6 damage. And so being able to attack for essentially 66 damage is pretty fucking nuts. It's pretty good. And so that's like a good example of like the difference between the instant bonus and the like the big powerful splashy once per day. Yeah, if it crit, it would be 4, right? It would be super nuts.
Yeah, and I'm less tuned into the math in 5e, but like that makes sense. That's like, a big powerful splashy effect that you use to, really juice the numbers once a day. That
you get in melee with the big boss and you activate the Crag Fist and then go hog wild with with like a flurry of blows, which activates your helm to give you the extra sort of like AC bonus. Even the thing with the AC bonus, like the thing that I felt like was really important about the thing with the AC bonus was that it was you tracked it and it was activatable, right? Another consistent effect that I designed for Josh was the Giga Sword, like I was talking about. The Giga Sword has an effect that is that's passive, but it's every time you hit with the Giga Sword, you build momentum for your subsequent strikes. Each stack of momentum increases your weapon damage by 1d6 and decreases your attack roll by -1. So as you are hitting, and it resets on you, like when you whiff, you reset down to 0 stacks. So as you are hitting, you're doing more and more, damage. You are just like pumping your damage through the roof. But it also has this malice effect where the more you hit, the less likely it is for you to get kind of your next hits. And it had a lot of really good. I think the Gigasword may be the best one I've designed, just in terms of watching a player manage it. Like watching Josh be like, I have to have advantage on every one of my attacks, because if I lose advantage, I just one bad roll resets your stacks to 0 kind of thing. And I just thought that was like really interesting to kind of like watch it happen. But I also think the Gigasword is kind of insane. Like, if somebody were playing the Gigasword sort of optimally, and if I were really worried about kind of hardcore balance, part of this is because Josh's other two artifacts are pretty weak. Not a lot that adds to his damage or offers much more than that. I think it's probably busted.
Yeah, no, I feel like I would, the way that I would like maybe if you did a stage 2 for these things would be like have that be a gambling mechanic that you cash out, right? It's like, at any point you can like cash in those stacks and get like, the effect ends, but you get a bonus somewhere, right? Like, you get to like guaranteeing a crit's probably too strong. But you get some static bonus and it resets your stacks manually. And the game is like, how far do you press your luck, right? Like,
Okay, it's funny you mentioned that because, like I said, all artifacts are also progress in power.
Sure.
And that's also I don't have all of the progressions listed out, but I have done progressions for most of them. And that's one of my rules when it comes to how the artifacts progress. They don't they don't progress by sort of adding more stuff. They progress by sort of doing more stuff, if that makes sense. Maybe the easiest one that I could do for this actually would be oh man, can I do this with uh let me take a look. I'm trying to see if I did any of the because there are a couple of artifacts that I have changed basically.
No, you worried about spoilers?
Yeah. I'm trying to see if I can find an artifact that I did the whole line for. Ended up okay. This one is pretty close. This one is sort of a spoiler because it still works kind of the same, but I did end up having to rewrite it. Okay, so the story here in 2024 or in 2014, paladins had abjure enemies, so they could do the target fear thing, right? And for Mard, who's playing a paladin, I was like, I want an artifact that keys into that ability, right? That is all about abjure fear. The artifact is the Black Bible of Cyrexis, which is like a special Bible that was at the end of the first dungeon. He was able to like pick it up, so it is all Cyrexis stuff. And the original version of it basically said when you hit an enemy with abjure, or like when you hit an enemy with abjure enemy, you also put a sort of dot. Let's go. We stole that off a skeleton. You absolutely did. It basically puts a dot on the target that just ticks for 1d6 necrotic damage, right? The way that this one upgraded, so I did do the whole path on this one. It said enemies who die within 1 round of taking necrotic damage from your abjure enemy are raised by Cyrexis' power as unholy wraiths that last for 1 minute. As a bonus action, you can compel your wraith to abjure an enemy within 60 feet. This functions exactly as your abjure enemy class feature. Additionally, the damage to your abjure enemy increases by 2d6. So basically, the idea was you frighten one guy, okay? You spawn this wraith, and now that wraith can chain the abjure kind of like forward. You would never have more than one out. Like the math wouldn't work that way. Theoretically, if you wanted to, you could, on your turn, abjure, abjure, abjure. And then I guess the enemies would all sort of die. But I was like, what if you could chain the frightened conditioned from one kind of like from one enemy to the next. So that was the progression. And then there was also the piece of it which was that ticking damage goes from 1d6 to 2d6, right? So it is adding kind of more as you are sort of level. 1 minute, yeah. 1 minute is basically until the end of combat, right? Like one of the things that I use, I don't do you have a litmus test for this? I think of enemies as lasting for about 3 rounds in combat. Most combats are over by 3 to 5 rounds. And so whenever I say 1 minute, it means this combat, but not the next one, is generally what I'm trying to communicate.
That is how I feel about it. That's like how the math tends to work out in Pathfinder is like, 1 minute is till the end of combat, unless for whatever reason the combat is very long. Like 10 minutes is probably 1 combat, maybe 2 if you're like in a dungeon. Otherwise, that's it. That kind of thing.
Yeah. And the important part to me here is the killing. Because, like, in my mind, this is a pretty restrictive condition, to be honest with you. You have to abjure. You have to hit with your abjure. Like, they can't save it, right? Then you have to kill that target in order to spawn the wraith. That's pretty deep into sort of combat, but it sounds really crazy because you get this. Yeah, I'm saying that feels like a free boy forever. Yeah, exactly. But part of it is like I feel like I'm hiding a lot of power behind this incredible, this like tough condition to hit. To have hit somebody with your abjure and then that person dies. That's how you spawn. That's how you spawn your unholy.
And how
wraiths.
often can a paladin use an abjure?
Oh man, I don't even remember. It was like a couple times a day. I think it was a channel divinity.
Okay.
So they had 2 at first level, and then it would scale up.
So
from
this
there.
makes sense. It's like you have to time it right, and you have to,
yeah, and it is also what I wanted when I was thinking of this. I was like, I want to be able to chain abjure enemy when it falls off. Is like, what's the point? You know what I mean? I was like, I want to be able to, or when you kill the enemy that is abjured or something like that, right? Like, I wanted to be able to chain that forward. So my initial sort of design didn't include the wraith. I was just trying to think of when you kill an enemy, and I was trying to think of how this would work in WoW. It's imagine you put a dot on an enemy, you kill that enemy, and the dot jumps to a nearby.
I mean, you don't even have to escape the game. Hunter's Mark and Hex work this way, right?
Well, yeah, and so, but then I was like, well, what if? And then I had it as a bonus action when you kill an enemy with abjure. As a bonus action, I actually think it was a reaction. I ended up using this also for Sarian's artifact, and we can talk about that in a second. But the idea was, it was like as a reaction, you can then like immediately abjure the new target. But then I got on this idea of it spawns the fucking wraith, and then you can command your wraith with your bonus action. I was like, oh, this is the greatest, right? Now I have my wraith do this thing. The next upgrade from there says, as a bonus action, you can compel an unholy wraith to enact vengeance against the target, or a target. The targeted creature takes 3d6 plus 6 necrotic damage from the wraith and gains 2 levels of exhaustion. A successful constitution saving throw reduces the damage by half and removes the exhaustion. Additionally, the damage of the abjure enemy increases to 3d6. So this was, okay, spawning a wraith is hard, right? What can I do? What else can I do with my wraith that's neat? Oh, great. Awesome. I am going to take that wraith and shoot it at a person. I mean, you don't even destroy the wraith. I'm going to use the wraith to deal damage directly instead of abjure, right? I don't need to chain the fear anymore, or I can if I want. But if I just want to do damage on my turn, I can be casting this, whatever, this con saving throw spell that does 3d6 plus 6 damage and then could inflict a bunch of sort of like exhaustion, right? That's very rare, right? So this is the kind of thing that triggers sort of kind of later on. And then the legendary is, as a bonus action, you can compel an unholy become a skull storm. The wraith dissipates and becomes an area of spiritual skulls in 10 by 10, swarming every living and undead creature in the radius. Each turn, all enemies take 2d6 necrotic damage, and all allies heal for the same amount. Once the skull storm has dealt 30 points of damage or healing, it immediately dissipates. And so this is, you just turn it into a bomb. Frankly, this is the Kunam was the boss, and the boss had this mechanic of casting skull storms, and so at that point I was just like, I want to give the legendary version of this item gives him the boss ability, which I think was, I think that was cool. That's like a full line going from uncommon to rare to epic to legendary for one of these artifacts.
I'm just curious, at what level do you expect them to hit the legendary thing? Like I said, I'm not great on the math in 5e, so I just kind of don't have a sense for when 30 damage is appropriate.
Yeah, that was the big question mark I sort of had. That was designed for the boss. That Skullstorm stuff is just the boss ability. I basically took what I wrote in the boss ability and I just copy pasted it basically in. But I do expect, it's a little complicated actually. So in hold on, let me do D&D 5e magic items progression maybe, because there's this table that's really good in the DMG. Okay, so in the first 4 tiers of the game, everybody is in the first 4 tiers of the game, everybody gets like a bunch of uncommon magic kind of like items. And then over the course of the next couple of tiers, they scale up, is really what it comes down to. Man, can I find this fucking table somewhere, please? And so theoretically speaking, what is supposed to happen is when you break level 5, when you break level 5, that's when you start getting into rare items. break level 10, that's where you start getting into epic items. When you break level 15, it's when you get into legendary kind of items. I actually think it might be a little bit faster than that, but it's basically something kind of along those, kind of along those sorts of lines. Typically speaking, you are, man, I'm never gonna find this table. Typically speaking, you are ending up with everybody ends up with sort of like a legendary weapon and a bunch of other, like a legendary item and a couple of rare and very rare items, and you probably ditch your uncommon items by that point, but you can only be attuned to 3 different items, so at any given time you only have those, you only have those 3 in D&D 5e. This obviously kind of replaces people's attunement, but the internal thing I have in my head is people essentially get 8 upgrades over the course of the game. The way the upgrades work is, the idea is when you get an upgrade, you can apply it to any one of your 3, and it just like goes up by, it goes up by 1. There's no scaling or anything to that. So if you get your first 4 upgrades and you go, I put them all in the Black Bible of Cyrexis, you could be a level 10, 11, 12 kind of paladin. I'm sorry, I could actually math out what it is. I think it's level 10 because it's 6, 8, 10. Yeah. So you would be a level 10, you would be a level 10 paladin, and you would have the legendary on one of your lines. But that means you're not splitting at all. So you have 2 uncommon items and 1 legendary.
Okay.
Where the number 8 gets you to legendary, very rare. So you can max out 2 of your artifacts, but never 3. And it basically triggers every other level once you go past level 4. So level 6, 8, 10, 12 is my sort of pocket math in order to get there.
Okay. That makes sense. So it's
Theoretically, if somebody wants, they could go rare, epic kind of thing. But I imagine basically everybody would want to just chase one path until they get to the legendary.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You almost certainly want to do that, right? Like that's like the optimal way to do it. Or at least that's the way I would think about it.
Yeah. And so part of my part of my thing about the future levels, like you saw with the Bible, the Black Bible of Kunam only interacts sort of with itself, and it only deepens its own mechanics. So it triggers on Abjure Enemy, and once Abjure Enemy, and only deals with like that kind of stuff. It is narrow and deep. It's not broad. And so, for instance, the Giga Sword, I don't want to reveal what I have, but like the whole idea with the Giga Sword is about managing stacks of momentum. And it's like, can you turn your stacks of momentum? Can you cash out your stacks of momentum, like you mentioned? Can your stacks of momentum give you other sort of passive sort of like bonuses? So, for instance, a different version of the stacks of momentum that you can imagine would be like you get +1 AC for each stack of momentum. So sure, okay, now you're maybe getting more defensive at the same time that you are getting more offensive, right? Something kind of along those lines.
That makes sense. That's also, it feels like it get out of control in both directions.
Yeah.
Is there a limit on like it falls off if you don't make an attack in a round or something?
Yeah. Oh, that is how it works naturally.
Okay.
Oh, it is when you miss an attack, it falls off. I guess I never really clarified whether or not you held on to your stacks of momentum. But the idea is that as you're swinging it, you're building up the stacks of momentum. So probably if you didn't attack in a round, you would lose your stacks.
My brain is going to, it's like, oh, so I'm going to swing until I have like an unhittable AC. I'm going to pull out my non-Giga sword and just like be invincible, right? Like in
Oh yeah. That would definitely.
I don't know.
That would
like
definitely.
I would say like I don't expect normal people to think like that, but this is the thing. Like this is the thing that if you handed me this sword, I'd immediately be like, I assume this falls off when I stop attacking because otherwise I am going to raise my AC and never attack again, right? Like
Yeah.
just bear hug people to death, I guess. But yeah. But I guess that maybe leads into a question. How do you think about those kinds of things, right? Like, how much do you trust the players to not like because you're designing for your table, right? So you don't necessarily have to worry about you know some guy on the internet being like, well, I would just abuse the shit out of the mechanics type of deal, right?
It's funny because I gave a magic item. I think the strongest magic item I have designed is called the no, it's not called the icon. It is something else. What is it called? Croak's Crest. Okay, Croak's Crest. Croak's Crest says you gain the ability to spontaneously cast magic missiles for a wizard, right? As a bonus action, you can consume the magic of a prepared spell slot to instead cast magic missile as if you had prepared it with that same spell slot. This is for Warren's character. There's a couple of pretty important aspects of this. Technically, in 5e, you can only cast one spell per turn. Croak's Crest ignores that. The idea is if you want to magic missile, pew pew, 2 spell slots, you can just machine gun these magic missiles every single round, right? One of the things that's interesting about 5e is that bonus actions are like a thing, but not all classes have a good way to utilize them. So a lot of my stuff triggers off of bonus, or like not triggers, but uses bonus actions. It's about giving people a good way to utilize their bonus action in order to do something kind of compelling, right? But like technically speaking, if I were to map this out, that's an insane spell. That's an insane magic item to give somebody. You can just cast huge magic missiles every single turn. Like it just turns you into this insane machine gun. I fireball and then magic missile. I scorching ray, magic missile, lightning bolt, magic missile, chain lightning, magic missile. You're just always magic missiling. And you can magic missile off of high level spell slots. So I can cast if I have 2 6-level spell slots, I can chain lightning, magic missile. And that's just like a ton of damage that can come out from a wizard in sort of a round. Part of this is that Warren is, a good, very lore forward sort of player, and a lot of the time is using their bonus action to, Misty Step or whatever, right? Like it just like do other stuff. And I think in a world where I'm giving that icon, or not icon. Fuck, what did I call it? Crest? It's a crest?
Yeah.
I give that crest to like you or like Mark or someone. All they will do is every bonus action goes to magic missile. But to a certain extent, I trust that Warren is like not that level of a power gamer.
Sure. Yeah. No, that makes total sense. Also, bonus action economies a little interesting. Actually, it was.
Yeah, that's very different for Pathfinder.
I would say you know how magic missile works in Pathfinder? You can spend up to 3 actions on your magic missile, and it increases the effect. But that's or you could cast it 3 times at 1 action, but then you burn 3 spell slots for like literally no benefit. So, but also it's just funny because I have one of the guys in my other group said something like Merles has been getting on every podcast and talking about what he hates about 5th edition, Mike Merles. Which
yeah.
And I just like listened to a couple of them, and one of them, he was like, bonus actions were never meant to be like this. Like bonus actions were meant to be kind of like a side little thing, but because they were a thing that was given to some people kept looking for ways to spend their bonus action because it felt like you were missing out if you weren't spending your bonus action. It was the thing you're describing, right? And so he thought that was a game design failure because it wasn't doing, it had bent the game in a way that he thought was bad. I know you don't always agree with him on things.
Yeah, I obviously disagree. I mean, I disagreed with him a little bit different, but I would disagree with him on the merits there. I actually understand what his argument is, and I think it's a valid, that's a valid argument. It's a valid line of logic. But I just think he's wrong. Like, I think players this isn't even really a water finds a crack thing. It is, in my mind, combat is a compelling tactical experience sort of thing. So another magic item that we can talk about is for instance, so Sarian has this magic item. Where the fuck is Sarian's stuff? Calendis. Okay. Calendis has 2 magical items. One of them, or 2 artifacts. One of them is actually a magic brand that got branded into his skin. He's playing a Beastmaster Ranger. And so the brand basically just replaces his sort of the way the Primal Companion sort of works is a little clunky and ridiculous. It kind of rewrites that feature to be a little cleaner. It says your primal companion can only summon Capricorn, an avatar of the immensely powerful, guardian, the Force Master. Capricorn is obviously a unicorn. As long as Capricorn is in within 30 feet of you, you can spend a bonus action to heal Capricorn with the Cure spell, using a spell spot of the appropriate level. Additionally, Capricorn benefits from your Hunter's Mark spell because that wasn't just true natively. And finally, if Capricorn fails a death saving throw, you can choose to take the penalty instead of them. So in my mind, I was like, I want to give a bunch of stuff that encourages Sarian to fight with Capricorn. Get Capricorn in melee and duke it out, because Capricorn is really hardy. He can heal Capricorn at range with his bonus action. And also, even if Capricorn does get low and starts taking death saving throws, he can take that like wound onto himself, but protected by kind of the cushion of hit points, essentially, in order to keep Capricorn sort of like up and out there. It's kind of like giving Capricorn 2 bonus wounds, if you think about it, because, theoretically, if you're a ranger, you're staying at distance, your wounds are never like at, sort of like at risk. I also gave Sarian the black arrow. This is a shadow arrow, replaces ammunition, can just shoot with the black arrow. The black arrow says, whenever you attack the target of your Hunter's Mark, the Hunter's Mark damage is necrotic, so it's no longer force damage, it's necrotic damage. And whenever the target of your Hunter's Mark dies, you may use your reaction to attack another target in range. If you hit, you apply Hunter's Mark before the damage. So the idea is you kill something, and you can immediately snap reaction, make an AOO on another thing in order to move your Hunter's Mark. This is me solving an issue I saw with bonus actions in Rangers specifically. Rangers have a lot of stuff competing for the bonus actions. Primal companions use bonus actions to attack. So if Sarian wants to attack with Capricorn, he needs to use his bonus action for that. I am also giving him this Capricorn heal with his bonus action, right? And Hunter's Mark consumes a bonus action to cast. And when the target of your Hunter's Mark dies, normally you can use your bonus action to move it to a new sort of target. So this is me. That's kind of me designing around a little bit of a flaw I almost see in the system of the overloaded bonus action on the Hunter's Mark, or on Rangers specifically, by providing this release valve and going, you know what? When you kill the thing, that it's actually not even when you kill the thing, it's just when it dies. When the thing you're Hunter's Marking dies, you can reapply your Hunter's Mark with a reaction rather than your bonus action, right? As well as giving you this kind of ranged AOE, insanely powerful. But that's like a little bit of kind of what I'm, it's kind of like a little bit of what I'm getting after, I feel like. I actually think this is the kind of design I am going to go for pretty hard in Pathfinder, because it sounds as though people have reactions to use. And I think giving people really interesting reactions would be a great way to design magic items, like artifacts for them.
I was actually going to say, that in terms of like, finding a thing to spend your reaction on, that's like a big thing. Like Pathfinder, like most classes don't get an easy thing to react with. You might want to like tailor it to your class, because I think the champions, like they get a reaction. They get a pretty consistent reaction. And then like if somebody's using a shield, that's going to be, using shield blocks a pretty consistent reaction.
Yeah, I like the idea of reactions in particular, because it sort of forces you to pay attention, right?
Yeah.
Like, Sarian has missed this Hunter's Mark AOO a couple of times. And it's like, I don't intend for that to be a punishing experience, but it is the kind of thing to be like, oh, I need to pay attention to every round of combat, because now the thing that I am interacting with on this one-to-one basis at range, right? Like, there's a huge upside for me if I get to, rip a black arrow on my reaction, because like just rangers are good attackers, right? Getting another attack in your reaction is good in general, and then also it frees up your next bonus action so that you can attack with Capricorn or heal Capricorn instead of I reapply my Hunter's Mark and then attack.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then Sarian also has one of those rings that has a bonus action trigger, but it is its own thing. Anyway, what's up?
By the way, I just wanted to say that you said that Capricorn is obviously a unicorn. Capricorn, the zodiac sign, is a sea goat, so that wasn't obvious to me. So
Oh, I'm sorry. Capricorn is obviously a unicorn because Capricorn in WoW. Calendus is his WoW character. And so this is like me making sort of like reference to the WoW character.
Sure.
But the funny thing is that that design for Capricorn is very different than the same version of it that I have for Marn. So Marn is also a Beastmaster Ranger, but I designed a completely different sort of version for Para, which is Marn's animal companion. Para gets gets this collar from the lizardmen that like makes Para sort of bigger and stronger. The collar empowers the strength, stamina, and durability of your animal companion. Your animal companion receives a +4 bonus to strength and constitution while wearing the collar, as well as a +2 natural armor bonus to AC. Additionally, your animal companion can use the second wind feature using your class level as its fighter level, right? So this is actually the same thing, kind of in like design terms, right? It is buffing the animal companion so that so that you feel good about throwing it into melee, right? Para can heal with second wind. Para is tankier. Para also just like attacks harder, deals more damage, all that stuff, right? But it's coming at it from a different sort of angle, which was something that was weirdly important to me, right? With Capricorn, this is all about the nature magic of the Forest Master and its spell casting focus, right? It's not Capricorn, it's not Para can use second wind. It is I heal Capricorn with my spellcasting, right? Same kind of mechanical effect, but sort of Vorthos flavored a little bit differently. And the difference there was that Capricorn takes advantage of the Hunter's Mark for raw, sort of damage, whereas Para is just getting like a flat buff, basically, to make sort of the core of Marn's like attack power sort of pushed a little bit more towards animal companion rather than actual, like attacking with a hand axe kind of thing.
Okay, so since we're trying to distill this down into like ways to apply for, ostensibly
Sure.
for Rachel, but also for anybody at home, do you feel that either one of those is better designed, or do you think that they're about equal, that they both appropriately rise to the occasion?
I do think they both properly rise to the occasion. I technically would probably say the Para version is worse, I think, because it's just more flat buffs, right? Like technically it is against my situational buff kind of rule to have +4 bonus to strength and constitution and a +2 sort of like armor bonus, right? Like all that raw stat is sort of a little bit against of what I'm getting at. But the way I justify that to myself is I sort of say that animal companions are a feature that rangers sort of have to interact with. This is not saying Marn does +2 extra damage. It is when Marn commands Para, it does that, right? And so it is a little bit about how Marn wants to use bonus actions and like access this thing. If Marn uses a bonus action to place a Hunter's Mark, Marn isn't getting that +2 bonus, whereas theoretically Marn could attack every sort of round. So that would kind of be like maybe my Steelman Strawman on like that
Sure.
design in particular. I also think technically the Hunter's Mark thing does trigger for Rangers eventually, so it's not that much of a buff to give it to Capricorn. It is a buff in the sense of lost time, because I think they get it at level 9 or something. On Rangers at level 9 get Beast Mastery Rangers at level 9 get this thing where their Hunter's Mark applies to their beast strikes. I am giving that 9 levels early theoretically, right? And that's also probably like a poor design decision that kind of like feels like bad and weird. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because like if those characters ever get to level 9, it's going to feel like an empty slot, right? Like like a
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and part of it is but really the core of it, the thing that I really wanted to encapsulate was one of these is a magic item that goes on the animal companion and makes that animal companion better. The other one is a magic item that goes on you and makes your interactions with that animal companion better, right? Like Capricorn flies out of the big magic tattoo that is now all over Calendis's chest, right? And like that was the real thing that was like those two sort of different flavor things.
All right. Way back at the beginning when we started talking, you said something about like there are some disadvantages to this whole system, and we can get into them later. Now is later.
Yeah.
What did you want to highlight there?
One of the big disadvantages of this system is that you get most of the lore stuff right up front. People are expected to get all of their artifacts by level 4. So you dole out the artifacts very, very quickly, and then they get them once every like 2-ish levels after that kind of thing. So now all of a sudden, if you were to just go artifact per session, you'd probably say that the artifact per session is like 1 out of 3 for the first 4 levels, and then it's like 1 out of 12 or 13 or like 15 or something. Do you know what I mean? Like, how many sessions does it take for you to go from 4 to level 6? That's the new number that you are now using to sort of like upgrade your sort of and the other big downside to sort of that is you are now assigning extra value to these early sessions that has to sort of scale. So for instance, I used that the thing that I was sort of putting a pin in so that we could talk about it later was when I was talking about the Stag Lord. The Stag Lord gives you an artifact bow, right? Now you are using this bow for the rest of the game. It's your artifact. It's incredibly powerful, kind of all of the rest of it, right? But when you kill a boss at level 9, it can't give you a weapon that is cool and is an artifact, right? All it can give you is one of these artifact upgrading sort of things, which is good and unique and like whatever, but like theoretically speaking, there's like less value to that, right?
And there's killing the joy of discovery type thing, right? Like,
yes, yeah, exactly. I've thought a little bit about this, and I've mostly just kind of myself that I'm fine with that sort of like nature of the system. So for instance, I thought I was so fucking clever about the storm thing with the Black Bible of Kunam, because I was like, oh, this is so neat. You're going to be able to access the boss ability. But I feel like if I hadn't talked about this in the podcast and Mard was getting that legendary ability at level 10, it has now probably been like a year since they fought Kunam, right? Do they remember that Kunam had an ability, Skullstorm, and that the Skullstorm did this thing and, like triggered kind of like whatever? Like maybe I would say that. I would like remind him of that or whatever, but like this is sort of that detrimental effect in action. That would be like a big downside, I would say, for sure.
And something I would say that works in PF2E's favor here in terms of like the discoverability aspect is you're expected to have more magic items in PF2E, right? Like the attunement limit in D&D 5e is like 3. In Pathfinder base, I believe it's like 12. So you can sprinkle in some more artifact or more non-artifact stuff later in the game if you want to still have that discovery bit wrapped in there.
Yeah, so that to me that's like the huge downside about sort of like running artifacts. I've thought a lot about like things I would do. So they were thinking about where like I was thinking that players would be able to like players could lose their artifacts or destroy their artifacts and get new ones, right? So you can imagine somebody has an artifact that they don't particularly like or connect with. Artifacts all have alignments, obviously, right? So for instance, I forgot the Black Bible of Kunam is lawful good. The Black Bible of Kunam is lawful good, actually, in terms of sort of alignment. But let's say that Bruticus wants to go a lawful evil route and doesn't want the like a good kind of along those lines. It goes, I want to discard my artifact and get sort of like a new one. I was like, maybe that's something that I would entertain, or like there could be a thing where someone's artifact breaks or gets consumed by some kind of process. You could imagine something where like sort of like in the end of Legion and WoW is really what I was thinking. You consume the power of your artifact to do a thing, and now you have this and now you're level 12. You have used the power of your artifact. You have sacrificed one of your 3 artifacts in order to do an incredibly important, impactful sort of thing. And this gives me an opportunity to do a duo, right? And now you get you have like a new artifact kind of coming. But I just kind of feel like almost all of those systems are designing sort of a solution, and the real answer is you deal with the downsides. There are some pros, there are some cons, and you move forward.
I would say you deal with those problems as they come, right? Because like the thing that popped into my mind is like, what do you do if your ranger using the bow is like, actually I wanted to dual wield axes, right?
Yeah.
Like,
at a certain point, like there's a level of a character comes to me and goes, hey, this artifact is like not jiving with what I'm looking for. And it's like, yeah, you can like, I would almost consider that to be like
It's a custom system. You can have custom solutions, right? Like
yeah. It's like a misfire special case of, all right, I'll go back to the drawing board, rewrite,
sure.
like rewrite.
I mean, you could even like turn this into like a hook, right? Like like let's say the Black Bible is let's just say for the sake of example that it's an evil artifact, right? It's like, oh, actually, what I want to do is figure out how to destroy it because this is a terrible thing that needs to be destroyed, and that probably takes some process, right? Like cast it into the fires of Mount Doom, right? Like not exactly that, but you know what I mean, right? It's like, and maybe I am tempted by it along the way, but like that's like a quest, right? Like it's like a hook, right? You can do a bunch of stuff with this kind of thing.
Yeah, because part of my thinking is it really comes down to the alignment. One of the things I want someone to think about when they're upgrading, we talked about this a little bit in my like custom rules sort of stuff. When someone is considering whether or not they want to upgrade an artifact, they should consider the alignment, right? So for instance, did I talk about an the black arrow? That one is evil. The alignment on the black arrow is neutral evil, right? If Calendus wants to pursue the Dark Ranger pathline by upgrading the black arrow, and I'm not mandating that Calendus become an evil character, obviously, but like it is a strong suggestion, I guess, right? Take the hint. Part of your decision should be more than just I like the gameplay of this or I want to upgrade stuff, because I also say I'm not going to tell anybody what the upgrades to their items do, right? Their items are going to upgrade, they're going to do a thing, and that's just going to be between, like they have to upgrade based on how they want to play, how they want to progress, right? Does the class Dark Ranger or the subclass, whatever I call these specs, does the spec Dark Ranger sound cool? Do you like the idea that Calendus is becoming more and more of a Dark Ranger? Great. Upgrade the Black Arrow. If you want Calendus to become more and more of a Silver Stalker or a Wild Warden, which are the other two sort of specs for the other two magic items, go for those kind of thing. So it's like it is a little bit of a fusion of thinking about the lore of my character, thinking about the lore of the item, right? One of the things about the items having those flashbacks is when you upgrade an item, you get a new flashback. You learn new things about this, about this item. Just in 7th Expedition, they got an item that I can't remember what it was, but it was Jabuji the Wizard cast Identify on it and saw the first emperor of Suran, the first emperor of Arcosia, basically, right? Because this helm was part of the first legion and was blessed by the first emperor. It's like going back in time and meeting Julius Caesar. That's like a really tremendous sort of lore moment. And obviously it is not for Jabuji. That's not a lore moment for Jabuji. But it is a lore moment that when Lou chooses to upgrade the hat, now she's in a position to interact with the first emperor. That's sweet. That's like a cool thing that kind of creates like a side opportunity for characters.
So you mentioned that like basically you expect, like, do you expect all 3 artifacts for the player to be fully upgraded by like, say level 20? Not that you necessarily ever get there, but
yeah, I actually do think by level 20 they're supposed to, but the idea is that my expectation is most players run down one line, run down a second line, run down a third in order. I don't think anybody will spread. It's possible that people could spread, but if I were doing it, I wouldn't do that way. And I think all of this stuff,
I was gonna say like, the problem I could potentially see there is that like basically once you've maxed out one, like numbers 2 and 3, just like you're getting the level 2 power after you got the level 4 power, right? And that's like you've kind of, and you're running down your favorite one first, so it's like you're hitting that high point, in kind of the mid game. And like maybe this isn't a real problem because you don't actually expect your game to go to level 20, but that's a potential problem I could see.
I mean, I did design the system so that people could go to level 20, but that's absolutely true. In the final few levels, when you are getting your most powerful stuff in your class, you're actually sort of getting your least powerful stuff out of your artifact because it is the third, at that point it's just dump stat, right? Like dump points kind of thing.
Yeah. No, like that. Have you run any of these games level 20?
No, definitely not.
Yeah,
I just designed this for 7th Expedition. They are level 4. In Dragonlance, they got to level 4. Nobody has ever broken out of the first level artifacts phase.
Yeah, so that feels like that feels like a thing that maybe we talk about, a couple of years down the line when somebody finally hits level 5.
Honestly, my original iteration was about side quests, which was each of the artifacts included a side quest with it. This was actually not true of the Dragonlance artifacts, because by that point I had abandoned it. But actually, for the I changed this because I just think it's insane. But for 7th Expedition, I sort of concepted out a level of side quests for each of the artifacts, and the idea was that players could kind of only go instead of you get a thing and you choose which of your artifacts to upgrade, it's you get a bunch of side quests and you get to chase down your side quests to sort of figure stuff out. But once I was thinking in that thing, and I was sort of trying to conceptualize and design 15 different side quests that are all pursuable at all points in the game after level 4, I realized the scope problem that was on my hands, and I completely scrapped that idea.
Also,
I do think that it's the kind of thing that I to in sort of like an improvisational way, but it would be very hard, I feel like, to get me to
that also feels like a campaign killer, right? Like that feels like we spent 3 years of real world time just upgrading artifacts and not advancing the main plot, right? Like
that's absolutely what it was, especially as I was like designing. Yeah, it was wild when I was designing. Yeah, I actually still have them all written down because I literally did all 15 before I thought to myself, this is ridiculous. I should not do this.
Also, I feel like it's also the type of thing that you don't necessarily want to set in stone, right? Like since you've been talking about this Black Arrow thing, right? The thing that's popped into my head is like, what if Calendus likes the Black Arrow but doesn't want to be evil? And the thing that naturally occurs to me is like, oh, he goes on a quest to purify the Black Arrow, and maybe it turns from necrotic to radiant damage or something, right?
Yeah.
But that's like a thing you decide on the fly to build out, right? Like it's not a thing that like you decide at level 1 when you're facing down the party. You see,
honestly, my favorite thing about the Black Arrow is I hadn't thought of this originally, but when I described it additionally with the Black Arrow, it was I had this idea for the Black Arrow, which was they're escaping this town that's been attacked or whatever, and there's this kid that Calendus is kind of connected to named Reese, and Reese is in the boat and he has the Black Arrow sticking out of him, and people are trying to grab it, but it's just shadow. They can't grab onto anything, and I had this idea sort of like in the moment. I had originally thought about only Calendus can interact with the Black Arrow, but the sort of improvisational piece of this that I caught, I was like, oh, Calendus has the icon of the Forest Master, the brand that Capricorn comes out of. And so it's not that Calendus touches the Black Arrow and he has some magical thing. It's that Calendus touches the Black Arrow to the brand, and the brand sucks in that shadow magic to save Reese's life. But now the nature brand also has this shadow magic kind of nascent within it, and it was just like this is sort of what I mean by like improvisational. It's like I just sometimes will come up with these fucking ideas. I actually do the flashbacks are all improvisational. All of the I have sort of a vision for all of the flashbacks. I kind of know what the artifacts are, right? Like I didn't write Helm of the First Legion without thinking about the fact that it is the emperor, that like this is the very first legion that was ever created in the Empire of Arcosia 10,000 years ago, all stuff. But when I was actually describing it in person at the table, that was just all essentially kind of like improv. And I actually think that's kind of like an important pillar is, this is a pretty hefty thing. Be improvisational as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's always a part of it, right? There's a balance between like how much you want to prep and how much you want to, really drive it home, right? Like,
yeah. When it comes to Pathfinder, given these parameters, how do you feel like you would design artifacts? Like if you were to take one of your Pathfinder 2e characters, just like as an example, like how would you design an artifact for your cleric or your punch Hell Knight guy?
So no, it's a punch mage, and the Hell Knight is the cleric.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, it's fine. Like so, just thinking about it, right? The way that Pathfinder items work is they like a lot of them have activated abilities on it, right? Like I think the closest thing that I have to this, it's not upgradable, but um, the cleric is a cleric of Abadar, and the Abadar's favorite weapon is a crossbow. Not that my character's particularly good with it, but he got like the Lawbringer's crossbow, right, which is like a written thing, and it basically has an activated ability where you can shoot someone, and if you hit, you get to roll a check, and then it ties them up, right? Like it binds them in shackles, right? Like you're arresting them from a distance. That's like the fantasy, and so things like that, right? Like I would look at a bunch of activated items and be like, oh, I will start with like an activated ability that will do something cool, right? Like that is in theme with the character, right? Like Barso, who's the Hell Knight cleric, right? His whole deal is like, you're under arrest. You can either come with me or face the consequences, right? And so like, every once in a while he actually just like puts somebody in shackles. Most of the time he ends up fighting them because it's, that's the way the adventure goes. The goblins aren't going to surrender and like, go to prison.
Yep.
But the flavor of like having this ranged crossbow that can like do the thing that he's good at, I think is like a good thematic fit, right? It's a little bit, it's not perfect because it's like an out of the, it's off the shelf solution, but that's kind of the route I would go down, right? Is like, look, there's a bunch of items with activated abilities. Those are the most interesting items in the game. They fulfill the situational requirement that you have because you have 3 actions a turn, right? If you're spending 2 actions activating your item, you're not spending them casting a spell. You're not spending them moving, right? And so it gives that piece of choice in there. You also have a little bit more leniency to like make them a little bit more powerful because you can time them per day, and like it's not like a dominant strategy thing, right?
Yeah.
You can also like fool around with things like variable actions, right? Like I have this is not a particularly thematic one, but I have a Ring of the Ram, and I can spend 1 to 3 actions on it, and it like does like a force blast out of my finger, and it doesn't get used a ton, but it gets used once in a while. I've talked about the Earthglide Cloak, right? That kind of thing. So, and you can put reactions on them too. I know you talked about using reactions.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about actions and reactions. I like the idea of an item that gives you like a. I was thinking to myself, I was like, a 1 action minor thing, a 2 action major thing, and a reaction would be pretty good sort of templates, maybe I would say, for sort of the kinds of things that I feel like I would want artifacts to be able to sort of do. Some stuff, obviously, like I like having stuff that's day. Mostly because it just gives people like that kind of like big sort of moment, right? And having good opportunities for that is really sweet, especially when people pull it out to sort of solve problems that the Sarian's third one is this ring, and the ring says whenever you shoot someone and apply the slow weapon mastery, which is just literally whenever you shoot and hit, essentially, you can your activated ring, your bonus action activation. I mean, technically, you activate the bonus action first, then you fire the arrow, but it makes the arrow chain, and instead of slowing, it restrains. So it is essentially a snare, and so it turns your attack from a single target attack to an AoE, and your AoE now snares, right? And like that stuff is super useful, I feel like, and like really cool because it just changes the attack parameters that you're making. But like that's a once per day thing. It's the kind of thing that solves a problem of the guy is running away, and so you hit them with the frost arrow chain thing, which is really good. Or Sarian has used it to give, because attacking a restrained target gives advantage. So like Sarian did it once to give Josh advantage to keep his momentum stacks. Stuff like that I think is like really sweet.
Actually, I think that's actually an important thing to point out is I think Pathfinder as a system is kind of tuned around acting as a party, like ideally, right? Like,
yeah.
I don't think I said this on the cast, but the way Magus kind of flows is like, as a Magus, you're spending a lot of turns. Like, you do 2 action spell strike, and then you have to recharge, but you also usually have to move if you're melee. I was describing this as why Starlight Span's pretty powerful, because you don't have to move. It's a ranged variant. But like, with Nick's character in Mark's game, right? Nick's character is playing a Magus, and it's like the ideal there is that like, the other characters, like, my character maybe grabs him and holds him, which stops him from moving and gives him a -2. And so then the Magus can go in with the spell strike, and if he's at a -2, since you've got 10 up crits, maybe you crit off of that, right? And like, that does a ton of damage because it's a spell strike, which gets like, your weapon damage buffed, your spell damage doubled, right? Like, that kind of thing. And so it just like, makes it go off really hard, right? But I think the game is strongest when you're encouraging that kind of cooperative gameplay, right? Where you are, instead of like, everybody is standing in their corner doing their own thing, like you are doing things to actively help the other, members of the party. It's like, I've got this one, you come and hit him, or I've got this one nailed down, you go catch the fling when that kind of thing. So opportunities for things to interact, I think would be good from a systems perspective. Obviously it's a little harder to do with like personalized artifacts because you're kind of taking the character singularly into effect, but one of the simplifications in Pathfinder is that a lot of kind of like your basic things are off guard, right? Like you trip someone, you grab someone, you flank with someone, they are off guard, right? And they don't stack. You just get they can take a -2 to their AC. But like you could like stack things on top of that, right? Like you could make something clumsy or make something enfeebled. I would maybe read through the conditions list because like some of the standard things like rogues at higher levels, they get these things called debilitations. They can make their enemy on a successful hit or successful sneak attack. You can give them a debilitation, which is clumsy. I think clumsy is a minus to dex checks, and like enfeebled is a minus to strength checks. There's like ones for casting stats as well, that kind of thing. And so those things let you kind of mess with the math of an encounter without it turning into direct damage, right? Like making somebody clumsy doesn't kill them faster directly, but it makes them less likely to hit your friends and also easier to hit because you're taking a penalty to their AC, because that kind of thing.
Yeah, I actually really love that aspect. Something else I was also thinking is the different levels of success can also play into this, right? It's the kind of thing where, let's say one of your items has an activated ability that forces a save. So Josh has an item. This is actually an item that I ported direct. Also, both Josh and Bruticus have these. They're called the Dreadquake boots, and the idea is once per day, again as a bonus action, you can stomp like the ground around you to knock everybody prone, and they roll a dex save sort of thing. The Dreadquake boots have, because it forces a save naturally, or actually the other thing, the Black Bible of Kunam also did this, right? For save, right? You can write in your own critical failure, success, crit success conditions on that, right? Like maybe getting a critical success on like on a wraith, one of these unholy wraiths, doing that possession bomb single target thing, right? Like that has an even greater effect. That now they're taking 3 levels of exhaustion instead of 2, right? Like that kind of thing I think would be like really dynamic and a lot of fun. It all introduces a lot of overhead, which obviously I don't love, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, but that's unfortunately PF2E is going to come with more overhead than 5e just by its nature. We are getting close to raid time. Do you have anything else that you want to talk about before we pop out of here?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I guess we are going to raid. Is there anything that you were doing during your talk about
during the week? Mostly I've been like focused on I have a game that I played. What's the name of this game? Dawnmaker. Got his recommendation off of a different podcast.
Oh my god, I know this game. This is the deck builder, city builder, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It is. It's fun. I don't know how long it's going to hold my attention for, but it was good for like a couple of afternoons worth of kind of like, it took a little while to understand what I don't think the tutorialization was great. But it definitely, once I like got the hang of it, it was definitely fun to kind of like build these things and build patterns and build out. I don't have like a great handle on how exactly like everything works. Like my current run is probably doomed because I am running out of easier options. I'm going to have to take an option that I'm not prepared to take, but I also don't feel like I've got a coherent enough strategy to build out like part of the key in like say the Spire is like cultivating your deck, um, you just have less ability to cultivate your deck in this game because you have like less ability to add and remove cards. So things are a little bit more expensive. You don't get enough gold to do it as well. And on top of that, there's some interesting mechanics. Like every time you reshuffle your deck, you get a negative. Like there's like basically the game ticks towards the lose state.
Oh,
so,
interesting. Okay.
yeah, and so it encourages you to puff up, and like in the course of a single round, you are adding cards to your deck, right? You build buildings, like you don't just play what's in your deck, right? Like at certain intervals, you add buildings to your deck from kind of like the pool that don't stay there, like they leave once you're out of that scenario, and then playing certain buildings will add cards to your deck. So there's kind of this interesting push and pull between like, oh, I might end up getting a handful of chaff, but I do need to put more cards in the deck because I need to be able to draw enough hands to accomplish what I need to before the deck ticks over. And
okay, that's super interesting. I have long thought that that's something that needs to be in deck builders because otherwise you get the Estrella effect where it's almost always wrong to add dice to your deck because you're diluting your synergies and overall sort of like power level. If you are including a malice every time you shuffle, right? It means that you building a bigger deck is actually good because it takes you one further away from a lose state.
yeah, and it's the systems interact interestingly. The thing that I'm finding is it's a little too easy to like pick a strategy and just drive towards that strategy. Or maybe the better way to put this is there's not a better way to do it than that because there's not enough consistency to like. I think it's a hard thing. How do I want to put this? I think it's near impossible to adapt on the fly, right? Like it's you don't see enough of the picture at once to be like, oh, I need to actually be going in this direction instead of this direction, right? Like,
Sure.
When you are picking a new building, like inside of a round, you get a choice of 3. And like I'm basically always pushing towards my my preferred way of play because it's just like it's not like I can see like, oh, I'm gonna have this is the next 6 set of options and I really need to be going down an alternate path, right? I'm just picking naively towards my my preferred strategy, and maybe I get screwed because I don't pull out those things. The other thing that's interesting here is that the building cards are a separate deck than your like playing cards, and the building cards there's no penalty for them ticking over. That's just kind of diluting the pool, but you also need to put some there so you get better stuff.
Right.
It works interesting. I think it's like I think on sale for $10 right now. I think it's definitely worth a look for that much. I think normally it's 15. Even then, I'd say it's worth it. If this was on my phone, I think I'd be playing it a lot more, like in kind of like quiet minutes. But it is a fun thing to derp around with.
Okay, I remember thinking I was like, I think I would like this. So I I don't know.
I mean, for $10, I would say give it a whirl and just play around for a little while. Anything from your week you want to talk about? How did you think Session 0 went?
Oh, I had a great time. It's wild you guys chose Heretic Heroes. Did not expect that one to sort of go for it, but I do think it has a really great pitch. This is what I told Josh in the car when we were driving back. Yeah, I am pretty into it. I'm a little sad to a certain extent that we didn't end up doing I probably did the most amount of prep for Doom of the 10th Fleet because first of all, it was a sandbox game, and I kind of felt like I had to get a better understanding of what the sandbox actually kind of like looked like. And also, it was the one that everybody seemed to be leaning towards. So
yeah,
I just
kind of
quietly biased my preparation towards that way, compared to some of the others.
You weren't even going to pitch Heretics because you thought Riptide was.
I thought it was Ripples in the Sand. I know. I love Ripples in the Sand. I want to do Ripples in the Sand so bad, just because it has this Buck Wild sort of moment. I also think it has a really fun, archaeology in the desert like setup. I think it's just like a great kind of like intro.
That also
sort of intro pitch.
I feel like Ripples in the Sand, it's a good kind of like second campaign. Right.
Yeah.
Because like then like what you're in. You're familiar with Saran, right? Like
But the thing I really like about Heretic Heroes is it gives you guys a pretty good off point compared to Doom of the 10th Fleet. That's like a game you could go 1 to 20 in really easy, and I would kind of expect everybody to do that. Like technically, you could offboard it when you're on the desert island. You get off the deserted island, you get your ship, you're doing some stuff. Maybe you get a second ship, and then you leave. And it's like, okay, we're gonna go do sort of like other stuff. That's fair if you wanted to kind of like, but I feel like I would expect people to go all the way to Doom with the 10th Fleet. But the thing I like about Heretic Heroes is it starts in prison. Your goal is prison break. And once you break out of prison and do a little bit of the sort of survival portion to get back to the Empire, to like actually travel overland without getting owned, kind of thing, you are in a position to just like continue down every other pathway, right? You can do Kovolgrad, you can do whatever. It's really only like it's on the game the 10th Fleet, like these are the games that you kind of have to commit to from level 1, and my expectation 7th Expedition is also one of these where like you're going the distance on these games, right? You are not going to be sort of fucking around.
Makes sense. Awesome.
Okay.
Well, we should probably get out of here because we're late to
we should I'm very excited to raid. Okay. It's what I want to do this week.
Well, with that, I'm going to say, if you have any comments or things you want to talk to us about that we discussed in the podcast, email us at derpsplaygames@gmail.com or podcast@derpsplaygames.com. Follow us on twitch.tv/derpsplaygames or youtube.com/derpsplaygames, where these go out live every week. That's all the links are down in the description. That's everything I have. But do you have anything else you're looking to promote?
Montabi got revealed, I think, last weekend. So go wish this Montabi. Creature collect Pokemon plus Slay the Spire. Okay, creature collector deck builder. It's very cool. I love it a lot. It's my next deck builder love after Estrella, basically. But I think that's it.
Something I forgot that I wanted to talk about. And this is not your game, so my apologies for stomping on it. But there was a marathon ARG, right? Like the new Bungie game, and there's a stream for it on Saturday. There was like Bungie did their big ARG thing, and it was crazy. There's a great Pipe video on like actually going through the ARG. And I'm actually excited for it because Marathon's got real stupid and weird lore. I recommend the Mandalore gaming series of videos on Marathon. I'm going to go rewatch them all before the thing this Saturday. So I think it's a Saturday. It's the 12th, whatever day that is. But with that, I'm going to say until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.